Eddie Gordo.
That's it. That's my opener. Rarely seen, but always celebrated, Capoeira has had an interesting history in terms of fighting game representation. Ever since Eddie Gordo kicked and flipped his way into the cultural zeitgeist in 1997, more than a few fighting games have introduced capoeiristas into the fold. Let's take a look at this iconic, acrobatic fighting style and explore how it is translated into fighting games. I am also probably going to butcher every Brazilian Portuguese word that comes up, but I will give it my best shot because I am not a coward. First, a brief history. Capoeira began in Brazil as a fighting technique created by African slaves to defend themselves against Portuguese slavers. The acrobatic and dance-like nature of capoeira allowed the slaves to disguise it as dancing, when they were in fact practicing and training real techniques. There's always a persistent question about whether or not capoeira is a practical or useful fighting style, but history presents a favorable argument. Escaped slaves who had depended on capoeira as a survival technique were able to form refugee communities called quilombos, where they could develop capoeira into a full martial art and teach it among their people. Anecdotes from Portuguese soldiers note that it sometimes took more than one dragoon to capture a quilombo warrior because of their strangely moving fighting technique. A provincial governor once stated, "It is harder to defeat a quilombo than a Dutch invader." Think about that for a second. A fully armed and mounted dragoon picks a fight with an unarmed, underfed slave and loses. The style was considered so dangerous that capoeira was outlawed in 1890, the historical equivalent of banning Rugal from Mexican arcades. That's not to say that capoeira is more efficient or more practical than other styles, only that there is historical precedent for how capoeira came to be developed as a martial art tradition. After all, if the style didn't work, no one would survive history to teach it. Thankfully, capoeira bounced back from its brief criminal exile and continued to persist through history. Many capoeira maestra opened schools and began to teach the martial art, allowing it to evolve and branch into different styles while reviving many of its old traditions like its music, songs, and the practice of roda, a practice where capoeiristas gather in a circle around a drummer who plays and sings, while capoeiristas take turns sparring in the ring. While most people are familiar with Eddie Gordo as the face of capoeira, he was not actually the first capoeira to debut in a fighting game. That honor goes to Richard Meyer from Fatal Fury in 1993, later succeeded by his protege Bob Wilson from Fatal Fury 3 in 1995. Sadly, because the Neo Geo just wasn't popular, Fatal Fury never reached the global acclaim of Street Fighter, and those who did play it would not have gotten a strong impression of what capoeira was from these two characters. However, with the release of Tekken 3, it cannot be understated how important Eddie Gordo is to bringing the world's eyes to capoeira. Through Eddie, capoeira finally received a treatment that captures its unique flow and rhythm, elevating capoeira to the global stage, being the first introduction to capoeira for many people all over the world. Before I continue, I feel like it should be made clear that capoeira and breakdancing are not the same thing. While breakdancing does borrow elements from capoeira, one is a martial art and the other is just regular performance art, and both just happen to be popular in fighting games. Breakdancing has a lot of the acrobatic flair of capoeira, but none of its historical context or practical theory. Not every character who can do a flare is a capoeirista. So what is actually happening with capoeira, and why can't I block this? What is he even doing? The basic principle of capoeira should be fairly obvious to the eye. Never stop moving. Even an idle capoeirista keeps themselves in constant motion with the ginga step, a rhythmic shuffle that keeps a capoeirista on their toes and ready to spring into action. This harkens back to the creation and purpose of capoeira, to escape from Portuguese slavers. In order to defend against a fully armed Portuguese dragoon, a capoeirista could not afford to get touched even once, and sometimes had to be ready to fight 2 or more soldiers at a time. This led to the development of techniques and movements that evade and strike at the same time, sometimes keeping low to the ground, sometimes making acrobatic leaps, but never a moment with your feet flat on the floor. Here's a few moves you might recognize. The Meia Lua de Frente, the Quijada, the Armada Dupla, the Ben Chao, the Meia Lua de Compasso, the Martello de Chao, the Es Dobrado, the Bananera, the Cavallo, the Al Fechado, the Abatido. Perhaps this is why Richard Meyer and Bob Wilson didn't really stick out that much as capoeiristas. In an early 90s 2D fighter, your movement is linear, slow, and methodical, with not a lot of room to employ capoeirista's characteristic non-stop motion. But the 3D space of Tekken gave capoeira the extra dimension it needed to express that free-flowing rhythm that dances seamlessly from kick to kick. The reason why Eddie was so popular with button mashers was because each kick shifted Eddie into a new posture, which had its own set of kicks which led into the next posture, and so on, creating a sequence that was chaotic, unpredictable, and seemingly endless. In 1997, no one moved like Eddie did, and no one since then ever has, except Eddie's Echo Fighters. We have gotten much better capoeira characters since then. Elena's meticulously rotoscoped animations in Street Fighter III are downright mesmerizing. But no one even comes close to the radical acrobatics that Eddie brings to Tekken. And while capoeira is a difficult style to adapt into a fighting game landscape, its distinct focus on movement and rhythm are unmistakable and iconic, owing to its perseverance through history as a cultural landmark of Brazilian martial arts. Normally, when a fighting style is adopted into a fighting game, it's because the style had already made a name for itself, either through pop culture or through years of martial arts tradition. But with capoeira, the result was the opposite. Capoeira was relatively unknown for most of the world until Tekken 3 put the spotlight on it, and now it is a staple of martial arts culture. This is the power of what a good adaptation of a martial art can do. It can open the doors to a whole new culture and tradition that the world hadn't yet known, and invite everyone on the planet to celebrate the cultural variety that the world has to offer. And we have Eddie to thank for all of that.
Select your fighting style!
That's all for today's advertorial. Be sure to give this video a like and let me know what you think about capoeira in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more content from Sugar Punch. Our channel is supported on Patreon, where patrons can get early access and vote on our future videos. I'm ABI, and I'll see you next time.